Christ promised to remain with us always until the end of the age.
So I ran from the call for about 5 years.
I dedicated it for my wife.
And I just kind of heard a quiet voice in my head saying, look at me.
What kind of feelings does it bring up that you'll be ordained a priest?
I'm humble, I'm grateful, I'm excited, a little bit scared, but I know that the Lord has it. So last February, I was doing some classroom visits in my teaching parish, and I brought one of the chalices from the parish in to show to the first and second graders, and they're looking all wide-eyed at it. And it was really beautiful just to try and explain to them, like, this is made out of gold, and what are some things that we have gold with? It's like, kings and queens. And to return to that as the core, this chalice is going to hold the King of Kings, the King of the whole universe. And to really want to show him the honor, the respect that he deserves. We can never do it as fully as we ought, but this is just a small way of both giving him that respect and of reminding ourselves of how important it is to take this seriously. Yeah, there's a lot of things that have really struck my heart about this chalice. First of all, there's these beautiful silver medallions along the base. And they have the Sacred Heart of Jesus, the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and then St. Joseph. And it really just is powerful to me, both in reflecting on the fact that my parents are giving me this chalice, and then to kind of have the Holy Family here, and really the powerful role that my family played in raising me in the faith, and that call to then help serve other families to go forward and to live that life as a priest, and how that's really modeled in the Holy Family. Around this part here is the words from John 15, I am the vine, you are the branches. And just that continuous reminder that I need to stay rooted in Jesus Christ in my ministry, that without him I can do nothing. And so that every time that I celebrate Mass with this chalice, it'll be a reminder to really come back close to him as the source of my life and return to him. One of the most profound encounters with our Lord in the Eucharist that I had was actually just before I entered seminary. So I graduated college and then was going to be entering seminary that fall. And I did a program called Totus Tuus, which is a youth faith formation program where you travel around the diocese teaching the faith to the youth in a different parish each week. And I majored in economics, I minored in finance and stats. I didn't have any teaching background. And so during the training week for Totus Tuus, I was slowly getting more and more freaked out as the week went on. And we had Eucharistic adoration each night. And I remember just sitting in adoration about halfway through the week, and I was just kind of pouring out all of my worries about teaching to the Lord. And I just kind of heard a quiet voice in my head say, look at me. And I kind of pushed that to the side and went back to kind of venting all of these worries, these fears. Lord, I'm not going to be a good teacher. The kids are going to take over the classroom. It's going to be a miserable failure. And a second time, I just heard quietly in my heart, look at me. And I still had my eyes closed because that's normally how I pray, just to keep from being distracted. And I just went right back to the worries. And now I was really getting freaked out. My fists were clenched. My breathing was picking up. I was super tense. I was like, Lord, it's going to be a failure. The diocese isn't going to be able to have Totus Tuus in these parishes again. It's going to be a disaster. And a third time, just cutting through all of that with great quiet and stability was just, look at me. Those words, look at me. And it was so different from the chaos of all of the thoughts that were swirling around in my head that I paused. And I was praying there and I was like, that was weird. Maybe I should open my eyes and look at Jesus in the Eucharist. And so I looked at him up there on the altar, and I just felt the deep waves of peace, this reassurance that as the summer would go on, things were going to be challenging, they were going to be hard, but he would be with me in it. And time and again, he proved that true. In the midst of the challenges, the weaknesses, the failures that summer brought, he never abandoned me. And so that's been a moment that I've returned to in prayer with the Eucharist. Just that simple reminder, look at me. and to keep my eyes fixed on Jesus.
Yeah, this chalice, this is going to be my first Mass chalice. It was my great uncle's. And so he was a Trappist monk out in Oregon. One of the big things that they did at the monastery was they made pound cake. And so that was one of the ways that I knew Father Peter, was that my aunt would go out and visit him quite often, and would bring back some of their pound cake. He was a very faithful priest there who loved the Lord. And so, yeah, I'm very honored to have his chalice. I think one story about Father Peter was that he was just so reverent with the Eucharist. At the monastery, the different monks would, after receiving communion and after Mass, would kind of go outside and be with the Lord in nature. But my great uncle really recognized the beauty of who he had received and what he had received, and he remained in the church, just like thanking the Lord, praising the Lord for the beauty of the sacraments, the beauty of the Eucharist. So just his real deep devotion to the Eucharist has really inspired me. And I think that's part of what has inspired my own journey to the priesthood. That's when I first felt the Lord calling me to the priesthood, was when I was an altar server at Mass, watching the priest, just kneeling there for the consecration, ringing the bells. There was a profound moment where the Lord really spoke to my heart and said, and kind of placed that desire for the priesthood on my heart. Said, like, maybe this is something you could do. And throughout my life, kind of, there have been those pivotal moments, those times in prayer, those times before the Eucharist, praying, that the Lord has continued to build and confirm that vocation in my heart. I was at a retreat in 8th grade, actually, and it was a time of adoration, and the priest was bringing the monstrance around to all of the kids that were there, and I saw kids falling down and like resting in the Spirit and crying and weeping, and so I was expecting something huge to happen when the Eucharist came to me, and it was when Jesus passed by me. It was kind of like nothing really had changed, and there was a little disappointment in my own heart, and I kind of put my head down, and the Eucharist went around a corner to be brought to some other kids, and I just really asked the Lord in that moment, Lord, I want to know you like these kids around me know you. How can I know you like that? And audibly in my head, I don't know if it was in my head, it sounded like it was someone right next to me, but there was no one around me. I heard a voice say, here, and I looked up, and the Eucharist had just come right around the corner. And in that moment, I knew the Lord was calling me to seek and find him and know him ever more deeply in the Eucharist. When he comes in both the bread and wine, he is fully present in both, so body, blood, soul, and divinity in both the bread and in the wine. But there's a reason he kind of comes in both. The blood of the animal was incredibly important because blood was a symbol of the life of something. And so even Christ's blood and water poured out from his side from the cross, his life pouring out for the church. So blood is really a symbol of life, of the life of the one whose blood it is. Receiving the blood, receiving Christ's life, is such a beautiful thing, a beautiful gift that he gave to the church.
Growing up in Sauk Center, we had neighbors on the farm just down the road from us, and Rita Vinwaldi was her name, and her great uncle was Father Fred Campson from El Rosa, Minnesota. And this was his chalice given to his parents in 1939. And little did I know at the time yet, the mentor priest for me to enter seminary, Father David Grundman, was a friend of, altar boy actually, of Father Fred Campson. And he gave this chalice to Father David when he was ordained. And Father David then handed it down to me. We grew up on a farm, and in the farming community, your neighbors are pretty much extended family. This chalice coming from ties from that family into my hands means quite a bit. You see at the base is just a simple cross, and that's what I really like about it. So when Father David called me and said that he has a chalice for me, I kind of took it in blind faith. that I would like it. And when he gave it to me, I was just thrilled that it was simple yet elegant. Unlike a typical seminarian, I didn't feel or hear the call until I was around 35 years old. I would attend daily Mass before work in Albany, Minnesota. And there was one time when the doxology, when the priest was lifting up the body and blood of our Lord, just a still small voice came to me and said, "I want you to do this as well." And at first I'm like, was that just me, or was that a voice that I heard? And there was every other day I would ponder on this question, like, what did I just hear? And I could bring it to adoration, brought it to prayer, and it was just this upswelling of joy and excitement of looking deeper into that call. But as our humanity will always get the best of us, I ran from the call for about 5 years. And it wasn't until the age of 42 where I was really able to say yes to the Lord and have Him increase in my life so that I may decrease. This chalice will be used for the first time for myself at my first Mass in Sauk Center, St. Paul's Church. You know, as a deacon, we're able to hold up the chalice, and I always think, you know, I'm holding in my hands Christ, but yet He holds me in the palm of His hand. It's a remarkable experience to do. And when I'm able to consecrate the wine into His blood, it's going to be a special moment for me.
My aunt and my uncle was the one who found the chalice maker. It's a metalworks company in the Philippines, because my aunt and uncle lives in they both live in the Philippines, and they found a metalworks company that specializes in sacred vessels, and they engaged them on making the chalice for me, and I was very grateful when they did that for me. I like the fact that it's quite heavy. Yeah. Most chalices are quite light, and it's heavy because of the metal. The base metal that they used was brass, and so it's made of both gold. You've got gold angels in the bottom, and a gold chalice, and gold on the four evangelists: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then you've got the Jesus and Mary at the base, made of oxidized silver, and the angels, the cherubims around it, made of oxidized silver. I was quite pleased with it. It's beautifully made, beautifully cast, and after my own taste. So I was very happy with it. And at the base of the chalice, where you have the picture of Mary and Joseph as the primary images on the base of the chalice, there's also a section where I engraved the first initial of my wife's name, the letter R. My wife's name is Ray. It's Ruth Ann, but I always called her Ray. So there's a letter R at the base of the chalice. Now, when you look at most chalices, there's always a marker at the base of the chalice. It's either a crucifix or a cross, or some precious stone. And the reason why it's at the base of the chalice is because in traditional liturgy, the marker at the base of the chalice is supposed to mark the spot where you're supposed to pour the wine, and where you're supposed to pour the water, and where you're supposed to drink the precious blood once it's consecrated. It's always consecrated on that one spot. So that you don't have to worry about all the other parts of the chalice. So it's always concentrated on that one area. When you have to wipe it, you wipe that one area right there, because that's where the precious blood is going to be drunk from. So this is why you have that marker at the base. And most people don't know that the marker at the base of the chalice is for a specific purpose. And now my wife's initial is right on it. So every time I celebrate Mass, I will be thinking about my wife. At the base of the chalice also is the date of my ordination, as well as the date of when my wife died. When I entered seminary, when I spoke to the Bishop of Des Moines, and when he asked me, well, why do you want to become a priest? Well, there are many reasons, and one of the more immediate reasons was because I wanted to be able to celebrate the Mass, my first Mass of every day of the rest of my life. I want to be able to offer it for the eternal repose of the soul of my wife, Ray. And this is why I have her initial on it. That's why I have her name at the bottom of it, so when I raise it, I will see it right underneath. And because I do want to be able to offer a Mass for her for the rest of my life until the day I die. It's something that's very, very important for me. You know, my wife was raised as in Iowa, but she was born and raised in Iowa. She's actually my connection to the Diocese of Iowa, of Des Moines. She was raised as a disciple of Christ. That's where she was baptized. When she became interested in Catholicism, one of the things that drew her to Catholicism was when I brought her to attend Mass, was what was going on at the altar. It was completely foreign to her. What was going on there? And she was just absolutely mesmerized. But what is it? Why does everyone become silent at that moment of consecration? Why is it that everybody becomes focused on the altar? And I explained to her what the Eucharist was about. That it is not just because in her church they had the little piece of wafer and grape juice, so it was all symbolic. And you know, I understand that. I get that. And then for me to explain to her the true nature of the Eucharist and the fact that this is why the focus of the Mass is the consecration, is because Christ becomes present in the Eucharist. That piece of bread becomes the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ. And to her, that was a completely foreign notion. Having explained to her and walked her through scriptures, for example, she came to have an appreciation of what was going on the altar. And it's almost like something of a magnet for her. It drew her into something that she didn't understand. And I told her, you didn't need to understand it, not intellectually at least, because it is what we call a mystery. But to at least walk her through what the finite human intellect can understand. And she was able to appreciate that and to surrender herself into the understanding that actually becomes Christ, and that it is what people are adoring right there and kneeling and genuflecting. She couldn't understand the notion of genuflection. And I explained to her why we were genuflecting to the Blessed Sacrament and to the Eucharist. And so she came to love the Eucharist because of that. And the Mass became a very, very essential part of her becoming Catholic. And I was grateful to God for that.